As a worship drummer, have you ever wondered what your worship leader is thinking? In this video, my friend Jake's going to share 5 things every worship leader wants their drummer to know. After watching this video, you'll have a clear understanding of your role as a worship drummer and how you can better serve your team. Coming up. Well, hey, this is John Manna from worshipdrummer.com, and we are here today in the Toronto YouTube space. And this is my friend Jake from Churchfront. He runs an incredible website for worship leaders, and you could check out the link below in the description. And today we're just going to dive into this subject, and he's going to allow us into his brain as a worship leader just to better understand what is their expectation of us as drummers. So Jake, thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
And let's just jump right in.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the channel, John. So the first thing as a worship leader, I want my drummer to know is that you are the most important instrument in the band. Now, don't tell the other band members, and don't let it get to your head as well. But all joking aside, if your worship band has a drum set in it, because some worship bands, just acoustic, don't have drums, but most do have a drum set, and no other instrument sets the tone, the feel, and the overall energy of a worship song like the drums do. So don't underestimate your role. And when I say you're the most important instrument, that means you probably need to put more time in than even the other musicians are putting in to learn your part, to know the arrangements, to know the different beats and patterns you're playing through the song, to understand how to dynamically, bring the song somewhere during those builds, to also know how to operate a click and tracks. A lot of drummers are in charge of that role as well. So, we'll talk about other ways, how you can really take your role seriously, but know that you are the most important instrument in the worship band.
Now, on that note, I just want to add, don't let it get to your head.
Yeah.
Our motto is putting the heart before beat, so there's no room for ego in all of this. And I think it was Peter Parker's uncle in Spider-Man who said, with great power comes great responsibility. So take it to heart, And that's incredible.
Second thing I'm looking for in the drummers in my worship band is dependability. As we already mentioned, you're the most important instrument, and it's really, really key that you're putting in the time at home to be prepared and to be dependable. So obviously there's the simple things like show up to rehearsal on time, because the rest of the band can't do a whole lot without you. But then also make sure that you're in Planning Center or whatever software you use to learn the songs, learn the set, know what the transitions are going to be. If you're in charge of the technology for running a click and tracks, make sure that's also functioning properly. You may have to show up to rehearsal a few minutes earlier before everybody else can. I view my drummer in my band as like my right-hand man or woman, if there's a woman drummer too, because it's just, again, they really set the tone and the energy and the style of a song. So be dependable. The third thing I want all worship drummers to know is that simple is better than busy. It can be really tempting, especially for younger drummers, to want to learn all the cool fills and builds and, all the complex nuances of a song. And that's great. Like, if you can take the time to learn those things, go ahead and do it. But especially in my experience working with some younger drummers, maybe they can learn what they should be playing, but they may not be at the level yet where they have the nuance of really playing it in the pocket and making sure that all those little 16th notes fall in place. So I would rather have a simplified version of whatever the arrangement is and have it be exactly on the beat, right in the pocket, right in with the rest of the band, instead of trying to overplay and be really busy, and then it just sounds like a mess. Because I had a pastor tell me the other day, he's like, drums are one of those things that when it's there and it works, you don't notice it, right? Because it just sounds the way it's supposed to. But then when you get a little bit too complex or busy and things get off track, it's obvious. It's the most obvious part of the band that's not right. So always, always, always keep it simple, not too busy. The fourth thing that I want drummers to understand as a worship leader is that softer does not mean slower. A lot of us struggle with drums in a church context because of volume levels, right? Sometimes we don't have the best way to isolate sound. Maybe you don't have a fantastic drum wall, or maybe you're just dealing with some difficult acoustics in a room. And that often means a worship leader is going to tell a drummer, hey, can you just play a little bit softer? Or, a sound guy will tell a drummer that. But that doesn't mean to pull the brakes completely on the tempo as well. But it's tempting. It's like, usually what happens is like dynamically, if we want to play softer, our tempo is going to drag. And then if we want to play faster, maybe we'll start rushing it a little bit. I don't know, what tips do you have for preventing that problem?
I think it's just remembering that you can still play soft, but have the intensity and the presence there. I think that's the key thing. So like separating volume and intensity, because to me they're very different things.
Totally. Yeah, one thing I often find myself telling drummers is make sure you're still feeling those subdivisions, no matter what. I mean, whether you're playing soft or loud, but I think when they forget to subdivide the beat and like feel those 16th notes or 8th notes, that's when the tempo will start to do some funky stuff. So the final thing and the final tip I have for drummers, and the final thing I really want my drummers to understand, is that you need to be attentive. You need to be attentive to the room, to the congregation, and the energy of the congregation and their engagement in worship. You also need to be attentive to the worship leader, and whether or not, especially in those more spontaneous moments, if we're gonna, reprise a section of the song, or we're gonna do a build, or want the drums to cut out, you always make sure you're watching the worship leader's lead. And then also just be attentive to the Holy Spirit. I think as a drummer, you are a worship leader in a way, and you just have to be aware of the atmosphere in the room, what's going on. Ask the Holy Spirit for guidance as a drummer, and of course make sure you're working with your worship leader so you don't randomly start doing a build or something like that that's throwing the rest of your team off. But man, I've played with some drummers who they just are really attentive to what's happening, what direction we should go in worship, and it's just so powerful when you are attentive to those things. So just make sure you're always keeping an eye on the worship leader, on the congregation. You're not just like having your eyes closed, looking down the whole time. Make sure that if the worship leader is ever glancing back towards you, that you like, no, okay, I need to pay attention to what they're doing. Sometimes, like I'll be playing, I want to give my drummer direction, and I'm like, I don't know, like doing crazy stuff. Like, help your worship leader not look like a moron on stage, but being attentive.
And to that point, I actually want to add, it wouldn't hurt to have a conversation even before service to kind of know, like with, as a drummer saying, hey, if this kind of happens and we hit the spontaneous part in the service, like, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to kind of read what's going on and respond? Or do you want me to just kind of follow you only, right? And as a drummer, you have the ability to either like kill it in a bad way, or really to emphasize what God's doing in the room. So I think that's a huge one to end with, a good one. But I would even add, just have that conversation with your worship leader. If you don't know, don't guess. Just say, hey, what do you want me to do in this context? So thank you so much for just kind of letting us dive into your thoughts on what worship leaders want us to know. And for all the worship drummers, I pray that this video has been super helpful for you. This is again Jake from Churchfront. He runs an incredible website at churchfront.com.
Yeah, the way I describe it, I help and I teach worship leaders how to lead gospel-centered and tech-savvy worship. I like to combine the thoughtful, theological part of worship with the very practical and techie side, because I'm a geek like that.
Ableton geek, right here. So I'm learning a lot from him as well in that front. And thank you so much for tuning in. We will put links to Churchfront and obviously Worship Drummer down below in the description. And then you can also subscribe to Churchfront's YouTube page, and we'll have the button right there for you to subscribe. This is John Manna with Jake, my friend, and thanks for tuning into this video.